Hello, everyone, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Jackson Alder. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Senior Online Community Coordinator here at PFLAG National. It's great to have you with us. As always, I'm joined by my friend, colleague, and our host, Jean Marie Nevada.
Hey,
Hi, Jean
Jackson.
Marie.
Hello. Wait, is this your first time doing the hosting role for this?
It is.
I know we've been together here before, but I am super excited to see you kicking it off.
Yeah, it's great.
Liz and Jamie gave up the chair for the day. God only knows what kind of chaos we can cause together now. We should take advantage of this.
We should. Between you, me, our cats, we can take over the world.
Oh my goodness. You and I need to do a whole show just on our cats alone. I'm sure that it would be of interest only to people with cats, but I think it would still be pretty amazing stuff.
Completely agreed.
But they're such divas to work with. They make me look like a cakewalk.
I love it.
Well, thank you, Jackson, for getting it started. I might see you on the other side of things, but thank you for hosting. Congratulations on your first one, and I will see you a little bit later.
Sounds great.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she and her, or ella if you use Spanish, and I am the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. So every single week, we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And this week is like all the others. And this week, we are really focusing our conversation on the end of this week, actually tomorrow, March 31st, which is the Transgender Day of Visibility. So this was a day established by trans activist Rachel Crandall in 2009 to celebrate the contributions of people who are trans and people who are non-binary. This really is focused on celebration and visibility. And it is kind of a contrast to when we look at the Transgender Day of Remembrance that happens actually in November. So a different angle on the conversation. So for those of you who have joined us before, you know the way we do this format. But for those of you who might be new to the show, every single week we select an article related to the conversation that we are having, and we post it online for you. And you can get that at straightforequality.org/STTA, which is something to talk about. This week's article came from USA Today, and it was actually about Zaya Wade, so Dwyane Wade's daughter, talking in her own words about being, as she was labeled, a microphone for trans youth. And it is a really amazing profile of this young woman who, like so many people, has overcome adversity, who has really seen incredible support from her very high-profile parents who have been incredibly vocal about their support for her, but also her own experience, and specifically her own understanding of what it actually means to be a role model in this space, which is really something that's tremendous given her age. So we definitely want to have a conversation about this article and about the Trans Day of Visibility. And I am really excited to be joined by actually one of my friends, Aiden Aizumi, who is from our San Gabriel Valley PFLAG chapter. And I'm going to let Aiden come in now and talk a little bit about his own background. Hey, Aiden.
How's it going?
It is going well. As I previously mentioned to you, I am in such a great mood because I get to talk to you, and it's the first day of baseball season. So I am like in full bloom today.
It's a beautiful day. Baseball season is here, so I'm ready for that.
I'm very excited. So, Aiden, could you, for people who don't know you, because this is your first time on the show, could you just give people a little bit about your background, specifically your connection to PFLAG, what you do with it, and sort of your role in this space?
Yeah. So, I guess I'll say I'm currently actually the president for PFLAG Pasadena. My mom is connected more with that our San Gabriel Valley chapter. And I've been connected to PFLAG since I was at sort of the end of high school, and when I came out and my mom needed support and kind of found PFLAG. And so I started also attending the meetings just to kind of build community and meet folks. And so when it came time for me to kind of step into a role that I could contribute a little bit more to the chapter, I decided that's something I really wanted to do. And I feel a really strong connection with our chapter just because of the support it provided my family. And so I wanted to just continue that relationship, and then somehow ended up in this president role, and have been doing that and supporting our little sort of youth group that we lead as well.
I love and somehow ended up as the president. I feel like there are so many PFLAG stories that start with, and somehow I ended up as the president. But it's been a good experience.
It has. Yeah. For me, I love it. So
So, the observation of Trans Day of Visibility really does focus on a lot of survival. It focuses on who's out there and contribution. But survival is only a tiny piece of people's stories. Our trans and non-binary loved ones are incredibly diverse and bring so much to this conversation. I know that you are one of those people who I do point to, and many of us point to as a role model in this space. How does that feel for you? How do you understand being a role model in this space? Is it something that you actually expected to one day hear?
It's interesting that you say that, because I think about this often, and I think even for me, I go back and forth between sort of wanting to just like live my life sort of in a non-eventful, not quite as visible way. And then I meet other people, or I meet young folks or families coming to our chapter, and I hear kind of the experience, and I think maybe that my story, or me being a little bit more visible or vocal about my experience as a trans person, might be something that is beneficial, right, to folks from a different standpoint, maybe because it is just a story as opposed to statistics, which serve a purpose. But
yeah,
I think I don't think my intention was necessarily to be a role model. I just kind of felt like I'm gonna do what feels comfortable for me, and be as authentic and honest with who I am and how I want to navigate the world, and then hope that is something that maybe allows folks to connect a little bit more with knowing a trans person, or knowing some of the experiences that maybe folks might be going through, and then it kind of just led to this role model, I guess. Kind of like my PFLAG presidency, I guess. It just kind of somehow I managed to get there, and that wasn't the intention,
It wasn't sort of a goal of waking up one morning and being like, role model and chapter president. This is
For
what
sure.
it's going to be.
No, I don't have a little list where I'm checking these things off.
So, I often think about exactly what you said, which is, there is this loss of anonymity. There is this sometimes loss of some privacy. There is this loss of those safe spaces when you become, when you are seen as a role model, because you have chosen to put yourself out there. Do you find it challenging? And I'm going to sort of add on to that, which is, has it become more challenging lately, given the climate that we are in?
I will say there is some. I would say it's okay. I guess it is challenging to a degree. Like, I'm fortunate to live sort of in Southern California, right? And so the climate here is very different. Not to say that it doesn't have its challenges, right? And so
Right.
I think also having access to social media, or having things be online, also gives folks anywhere access to be able to sort of take little snippets of portions of my life that I've been open to sharing. And I think it is more difficult right now, because there's this sort of underlying fear that I have, even living here in the LA area, about like people accessing things that I'm sharing with really good intentions of just trying to be, again, like really transparent and honest about my experience, and that getting sort of misconstrued or manipulated to seem like it's something that it's not. And it's happened to me before, where I did an event for somebody, and a group took that Instagram post and tried to turn it around and manipulate it. And so it's hard, because I want to keep doing that work, but it is a little bit I think a little bit more challenging right now, just given the sort of consistent attacks on trans folks' lives.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point that those of us, and I too live in Southern California. So, for those of us in more accepting places, I think we're really lucky right now. We're really privileged and almost blessed to not experience some of the other things. But it shouldn't be forgotten that every place we are seeing these kinds of attacks.
Correct.
There's a really big conversation that often happens, and this is not specific to the LGBTQ space, but it is of kind of this burden that often gets placed on marginalized individuals about being role models, that there's a lot going on, a lot that often needs to be navigated and survived that some individuals don't have to go through. Plus being a role model, which definitely, you become a little bit more conscious of your words and actions and where they might actually go. Have you had this sense that it does add an extra level of burden? And how do you see that conversation?
Oh, it's interesting, because burden feels, well, funny enough, it feels heavier than maybe I'd want to admit that it can be. but I do think there are times where it is like, you're maybe just tired, or I feel like a little burnt out. I think a lot of us who work in this, in sort of this, in this world and in and around activism, it's sometimes just a little bit exhausting to feel like you're doing the same thing year after year. And I don't feel like we're always making the progress that it feels like the amount of work we're putting in and time and energy should be, you know, we should have gained more ground. Right. And so sometimes, yeah, I think there is this, that I feel maybe a more of like an obligation to continue those conversations and to be like, yeah, I guess I really should, you know, attend this event or speak out in this way or post something to my Instagram, because, you know, I know that it's really the right thing to do to continue this work forward. But there are some times where I do just kind of want to like put the phone down, you know, not check my emails, and just kind of just, you know, go to the market and do my laundry and, you know, walk my dog and not think about some of those things. But at the end of the day, you know, when I meet the families that come to our PFLAG chapter, when I'm talking with students that I work with, you know, in my day job, it's kind of what gives me a little bit more of that, like, I guess, energy or fuel to continue having conversations with folks and continue doing those things, just because it is so important. And these little steps forward, I think, and that momentum and continuing it is what's going to be beneficial in the long run. And so I would say maybe it is a little burden, but I also feel like it's one that I've sort of decided I'm willing to sort of carry for a while. You know?
I appreciate that you were like, burden feels a little heavy, but there is something there, but perhaps not as weighty as that. You know, one question that I actually hadn't even thought about until right now is, you are seen as a role model to many people. Did you have role models?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like I came out in a really weird time of sort of this sort of boom of trans folks in the media, trans folks like accessing YouTube. But when I was younger, I don't think I really had that. Like, I didn't see the representation. And so a lot of the folks that I looked to as role models were we were sort of all coming out, or at least coming out in a way that was more visible, or I could access like social media, right, and YouTube at the same time. So it felt kind of weird because I was like, oh, this person's also coming out right now. But I'm just like so in awe of them and what they're doing in their story. And so, you know, when I've had the opportunity to like hear other folks speak on their stories, like hearing Janet Mock, right, or Laverne Cox speak, I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's folks that like we were all sort of coming out about the same time. But you know, their stories have been so powerful, and for me, I'm like, wow, these are people that are just, you know, amazing in what they're doing and the platform that they have to be able to share their story. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I came out and we were all doing the same thing at the same time. But there's definitely folks that I gravitated to.
Literally the time that you were talking about, there were so many stories about it. Like, there were actually news stories about the fact that so many people were starting to come out and disclose, and suddenly there was this boom. I mean, I remember, I think it was Janet Mock, I think it was, on the cover of Time magazine, and thinking, oh my goodness, I can still see, you know, having this moment and thinking, a lot of progress. So you did mention this, and I'm sorry for getting your chapter wrong. I should have remembered you're Pasadena, and your mom is San Gabriel. But you are the kid of a PFLAGger, of a pretty prominent PFLAG mom, who I regularly see in my emails being referred to as mom by everybody, which you've probably gotten used to. We are both PFLAG kids.
Oh yeah, I know. I've got a lot of siblings all over.
You do. Somehow you and I are also distantly related because of your mom.
Exactly.
So, you know, your mom really very much got out there. She's been incredibly visible, especially in API communities. Did you feel like you were kind of following her lead into this, or was this a joint decision that you were going to do this work together? Because you two have worked on a book together, which is pretty amazing. And did it turn into something bigger than you expected at first?
You know, of course, like, I guess I can't really speak for her, but in the conversations we've had, we definitely, I think the intention really wasn't to be as visible as we've ended up deciding to be, and kind of choosing that path. Like, we, you know, when she started going to PFLAG, she was definitely a very different person than she is now. And that level of confidence that she has and her ability to use her voice and to speak to folks and to connect with, parents and families all over, that wasn't the same, right, as it was when she first started. Like for a lot of our families, right, there's just a lot of fear and questions and trying to understand. And so I don't think that was the intention. And even when we went through this process of writing a book, it kind of just was sort of like what came with that territory of like, well, you're going to have to go right and now like try to talk about the book. And so we just kind of ended up doing that. And I don't know if it was like one of us followed the other. I think we both just kind of fell into it about the same time and then decided it was kind of a good duo, like her experience as a mother, my experience as the child, but also as the trans person, and for us to be able to connect with folks. So it's been just like a little song and dance we do.
It is kind of like a perfectly choreographed song and dance. And I've really appreciated the conversations that I've seen you both have together, because it does get to both sides of that conversation about the coming out and disclosure experience on both sides of the conversation, about what it is like to suddenly find yourself in this space being asked to provide support, again, on both sides of the conversation. And I think it really gives a big picture of what this kind of work looks like. So Transgender Day of Visibility really does focus on the positive, whereas in November, we're looking and memorializing a little bit more. One of the conversations that I feel like I see a lot more, and I think this actually came out of African-American communities, with the conversations about Black joy, has been those conversations about queer joy and the importance of that. And I actually just was reading another article about it this morning. And yet you made a point earlier, and we both have kind of touched on it, that right now it is an incredibly difficult time to be a member of this community, particularly difficult if you're trans, if you're non-binary, because there's so much coming at you, over 400 pieces of legislation this year alone. Mm-hmm. And yet this joy, this recognition of joy in our lives often becomes a tremendous act of defiance. So I would love to know, what brings you joy these days in a world that is incredibly not joyful sometimes?
Yeah, honestly, for me, I find a lot of joy, and sort of in a way for myself, it's a self-care thing, but in like live music and in art. I think some of it is just like the expression of it all, and sort of the moods that come with that. I definitely find joy in just spending time in community spaces that are very affirming, right? And that we can like sort of hold each other, and sometimes that's like crying together, right? Or it's like celebrating these little victories that we can. And for me, it's like that's kind of it right now. Like I really gravitate towards that, like live music and the arts, time with my family, of course, but time with community, right? And folks that are just sort of in the same fight or in the same space. Yeah.
Have you when you are in these spaces and you are especially interacting with younger people, I mean, you are young, but I mean, there are now even people who are younger than you are, who you're working with, who you are talking to. How are you talking to them about survival right now? Because I mean, we want to keep people positive, but it is pretty bad out there. Are you still trying to help them understand that there are sources of hope and so sources of joy? And how do some of those conversations sound?
I mean, I'll be honest, some of those conversations are hard, because it's like, I don't have always the right words or even an idea of how long, right, this is going to be. Like how I struggle with this, like, yes, I want to instill some hope, right? And something to look forward to, but it is hard when on every, like, news articles coming out, that's not what's being like shown to them. Some of what it is for me is I've just tried to, I'm like really not good with advice. Maybe that's a PFLAG thing too. It's like, we're not, at least at our chapter, we're like, we don't give advice, but we like share experiences. And I feel like that for me is very true too. If they ask things, it's like, I don't necessarily have an advice to give you, but I'm trying to just live my life in a way that hopefully for them gives them some hope. I'm like, that I am working and I was able to go to school, right? And I'm doing things that I enjoy and living my life to an extent that feels authentic and comfortable for me. And my hope is that just by continuing to do that gives them an idea of like something that they can look forward to doing, and something for their lives as they continue to get older and, you know, are able to continue their transition or just kind of their growth, right, and individual growth. And so that's kind of my thing with them, is because I don't feel like I honestly don't have something I can tell them that I feel like is going to make it better right now. And I'm not a fan of like telling them like, don't worry, someday it'll be better, because when, right. And when you're young, or even for myself, like that kind of delayed gratification or that having to wait isn't realistic. It doesn't feel hopeful. It feels just like really like, well, when is that going to be? And so, yeah.
I have to say that is such an interesting point for you to make about this idea of this. We're almost giving people delayed gratification, or saying joy is going to come to you, but we can't say it's going to come right now. And I can't even say it's going to be next year. And that's a really hard place to be. As you talk to these young people, do you find, when you compare it to your own experience, which isn't that far behind you, but do you find that, do you think that they immediately have more access to resources than you had? Do you find that their circles of support are expanding? Because we're starting to see so many allies, young allies developing out there. Have you seen a shift in that at all?
I do think like access to resources has definitely boomed, right? And I'd say the last 10 years, and even more so in the last 5 years, right? And I think that does give them at least access to be able to navigate outside of maybe our immediate communities, right? And to be able to reach out online to folks. But yeah, I did not have, I feel like, yeah, when I started coming out was sort of the tip of that, when folks started starting to have those conversations. Trans, information and resources was just kind of starting to come out on some of the like major organizations' radar, right? And so I had resources, right? And I'm fortunate I did have access to that, but it's definitely much more in depth now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I really do think there sort of was this tipping point. And you were right on it. And it's interesting to see how that has changed. So we are trying to focus on the positive today. Because we're talking about joy and visibility, I'd love to hear about maybe one or two examples of people who are trans, people who are non-binary in that space, who bring you joy and who you think are bringing other people joy.
Yeah, I would actually say like the youth that attend our chapter, for me, it's like every month is, it doesn't matter how tired I am. I get to our meetings and I get to spend time with young folks who are there's just a different energy, right, that they bring. And when I get to see them in authentic spaces to be themselves, there's just something really kind of beautiful about that. And I don't know, I don't know what their day was like either when they were at school, but to know that they get to spend some time with us and I get to see sort of their kind of natural, authentic state where they're just being young folks, to me is like, it's just kind of what I wished other people could see and would understand, like, that's really what this is, right? You're talking about this like kind of really scary thing, and you're trying to make trans folks sound and non-binary folks sound like this sort of kind of dark entity. And I'm in this room with these kids that are just laughing and they're having the time of their lives. And I'm like, how can anybody think anything otherwise? Like they're beautiful young folks. And for me, that's definitely where I'm like, I find they bring me a lot of joy, and I think I get to learn a lot from them and their experience. And so, yeah, it's pretty magical, I think.
I really love that, because, so many times when we ask questions about, who's bringing you joy, people's brains, their responses immediately go to super visible people. And I just think it says so much about you and sort of what your experience in your world looks like, that yours went to the youth that you're working with. And I think it's such a good answer because, as somebody who's been doing this for a while, I think sometimes when I meet some of these younger people, I'm like, I had your courage and your sense of this is the way it's going to be at your age. What a different experience I'd have. They are remarkable. They're truly remarkable. And the fact that so many of them are maintaining that joy in the face of what is a decidedly hideous landscape for their lives right now.
Yeah. Yeah. They're ready though. They're ready to get to be able to vote and do some things, but yeah, they're pretty amazing.
I really love that. So you have been around PFLAG long enough to know we're like doers. We have to give people stuff to do. There's always a project at PFLAG that usually ends up being you becoming a chapter president.
There you go.
So, you know, as we get towards Trans Day of Visibility, we want to make sure our allies are doing something, and especially doing something meaningful. So I would love to talk about, and I know you said you don't typically give advice, but let's call this one guidance.
Sure.
What kind of guidance are you giving to allies? So all those people, the friends of these kids who are coming in and asking what they should be doing, the parents of these kids, and even just those people who are like, I care about this. I'm bothered by what I'm seeing out there. What sort of things, give me a couple of behaviors that allies should be taking up now and maybe make tomorrow their day to put the stake in the ground and do it.
Yeah, I would say like calling your representatives, calling your senators, to vocalize your support for trans folks, or you're not your support for some of the bills, right, that are being put forward. If folks are able to, like, I know that's always an accessibility thing in terms of money, but if you have the ability to donate to some of the places that are kind of boots on the ground, right, trying to fight these bills, I would say that's definitely a way. And then I don't know too many people who don't have social media. And so using platforms to be visible and outspoken about their support for trans and non-binary folks, and right, that's like, to me, a very easy one, because it doesn't take a lot of time, and it also doesn't take a lot of money. You just have to be able to post something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that you said that, because I found that when I'm teaching, I say to people, every time you post something that's positive, you're creating a better space, because there's so much negative that's out there. And it doesn't seem significant that you just shared this one thing, but it is significant for the person who needed to see it. And I think that's important. Yeah. One more question, and I wasn't planning on asking this one, but it comes up a lot for me. And I think I would love for people to hear your answer to this one, especially on a day when we were talking about visibility. One of the best ways for us to help facilitate visibility is by giving people respect. So for people who say, and we get this question all the time, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up on the pronouns thing. What do you say to them in terms of empowering them to do it anyway and to get out there?
Well, in the past, I've told people, I've messed up before too, right? Like the youth I work with, sometimes it happens, right? And for me, the biggest thing is like to make that correction, to not blow it out of proportion, to not draw like unnecessary attention, and just apologize, correct myself, and then I kind of continue on, because acknowledging I made the mistake, one, is a very humbling experience, but then to correct it also then affirms, right, and respects that person and their pronouns, and then I can just continue on. But a lot of it is using those pronouns whether the person is there or not. I think sometimes it's just practice and kind of retraining our brains.
Yeah. And you're helping build visibility when you do it right. Thank you for answering that. It comes up all the time. Every time we teach, every time we open up the lines, people ask us about that. And I think it is a visibility conversation too. Aiden, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'm glad that we got to do this. We finally got to do something together for work.
I know. It's fun.
I appreciate you.
No, thanks for inviting me. This is super fun. I enjoy spending time with, PFLAG folks.
Thank you so much. We will definitely have you back, maybe for the pet one. Anyway, it is time for me to wrap up my constantly running mouth. So I hope everybody has had a great week. I hope that you're being safe out there. Please make sure that tomorrow you are talking about Trans Day of Visibility. Make sure that you are posting, make sure you're giving respect, having those conversations, putting yourself into the discussions. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. We'll be back next week with a very, very good show, a pretty exciting topic. We're going to be talking about beer, my friends. Figure it out, LGBTQ and beer. It's going to be an interesting discussion. If you need support, please visit us at pflag.org. And as we wrap up the exact same way every single week, we remind you to do 3 things. First of all, to run fast. Second, to laugh hard. And most of all, please be kind. If you need support, please visit us at pflag.org. Otherwise, we will see you again next week on Something to Talk About Live. Bye, everybody.